TV viewers. Jayne Spooner here, Rice County Master Gardener, located here in Faribault. Still practicing my social distancing, so I'm here recording this here in my little office here at home. But the nice part is spring weather has arrived and I've been able to play a lot in my gardens. I'm probably farther ahead with garden cleanup this year than I ever have been. A lot of it in part that we're not going anywhere very much other than to the grocery store. And maybe just for a quick drive just to get out and just get out. And and my husband's also working from home, so during his break times and stuff, he's helped a lot. And so yeah, we're doing really well here with our gardens and stuff. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, the weather's warming up and it's really time to start thinking gardening. And we're going to talk a little bit today about, rather than about flower garden, we're going to kind of go back to the future. We're going to talk about victory gardens. Back during World War I and World War II is when victory gardens actually came into existence in a lot of backyards and actually parks and community spaces. Much like we have community gardens now, and people are getting back into gardening because they want those fresh vegetables. And it was in part due to a war effort. Government felt that it was a civic duty and also a morale booster to get out and actually start a garden. And it was a way of supplementing the rationing of the rationing coupons that they had back then. Luckily, we haven't gone to anything like that with what's going on in society today with this pandemic, but I know people are looking for other options for their yards. So when they started these back during World War I and World War II, government actually felt that it was a civic duty, which basically boosted morale and that gardeners could feel empowered by their contribution of labor in maintaining their garden and in planting it, and they would be rewarded by the fresh produce. And there is a sense of a good feeling the first time you harvest your carrots or your lettuce or your tomatoes or your cucumbers. If you've never been involved in gardening ever before, it is a sense of pride. I grew up with a grandmother that had huge vegetable gardens, and as a child you take it for granted. My mother also continued her gardens, and we had lots of cucumbers, fresh tomatoes, peas, beans, and we also did a lot of it where we put it away in the late summer, early fall, where we preserved, we froze, we made jams, jellies, pickles. So I kind of grew up around that, and at the time I kind of thought, this is certainly nothing that I want to do in my life. But as I've grown older, and my husband, he grew up with a father that was very active as a gardener, and so so it kind of got us back into it that we wanted to have those fresh vegetables around our own house, and so we've been gardening. So let's say that you want to start your own victory garden at home, and this is a great time. It's actually something to do outside. It's something to get your family involved with, because this can really be a family project. And with distance learning now for your kids, this is a way of teaching them about plants and soils and maintaining a garden, and teaching them about good food and where food comes from. So there's a lot of lessons that not only as adults we can learn, but we can transfer that on to our children. So if you've never started a garden, I guess what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about is a couple of different options that you can take on if you really want to get into this. So I guess we're going to start with, have you ever gardened? If you haven't, be realistic. Don't go and plow up your whole backyard and think you're going to plant everything to, be able to preserve and freeze and put away for the fall and the winter. Be realistic about what you're going to be able to do, because eventually we will be going back to work. Kids will be going back to school. They will be going back, to their activities. So you want something that's manageable. So be realistic about what you want to do. So, and that's where you get the family involved with it to see how much they really want to do. So first of all, we're going to talk about how do you get started. And first of all, again, just like any other gardening thing we've talked about in the past, whether it's container gardening or perennial bed gardening or whatever, is location, location, location. And the same, standards come from, happen for our vegetable gardens. But the big thing you need to remember is you're going to need at least 8 hours of sunshine. And if you have a heavily shaded backyard, you're not going to be able to probably do some of that, but there are some other options that you can do if you can find other spots of, good sun exposure for your garden. So let's say you do want to dig up your backyard. So how are you going to go about and do that? So find that spot in your yard and get some stakes, get some string, and measure out a square, a rectangle. Just make sure it's even. You kind of want to make it aesthetically pleasing. You don't want some haphazard kind of abstract, plowed up area in your yard. You want to basically, make it nice, aesthetically pleasing. So mark out your area, and then what you're going to want to do is you're going to take a spade and you're going to want to shovel off and scrape off that top layer of sod, because you're going to want to expose that dirt. And so the sod can either be taken to the compost, or if you want to start a compost pile, that's for another maybe episode. But just you're going to put that aside. Now, getting that ground worked up. If you're going to have a small area, it's something that you can probably do by hand. Get your kids in. It's good physical activity for them, but just get some shovels and just overturn it and continue to overturn it and get a tined rake and kind of spread it out. And then you can kind of start to, amend your soils. And one of the best ways to do that, of course, and I've talked about that a lot, is basically doing a soil test. And right now, the University of Minnesota Soil Testing Lab is open. So I would recommend going and doing a Google search for the University of Minnesota Soil Testing Lab. And it's going to give you all the information that you need, how to do a soil test and how to send it off to them so that you can get your results. And once you get those results, it will be able to tell you, based on the fact that you're going to be putting in a vegetable garden, and it will tell you how to amend that soil. So you've got a little bit of time, because basically, as I record this, it's the beginning of May. I like to always err on the side of caution with weather-wise, is the fact that I generally, personally, don't put my vegetable garden in until mid-May to the end of May, because there are still times that you're going to have some cold weather, and there's a lot of vegetables out there that don't like that cold weather. And if you're growing, tomatoes from starts, or peppers from starts from the greenhouse, they're going to freeze, and you're going to have to start all over. And believe you me, I got anxious one year. I thought, oh, we're cool. And I put in a bunch of tomatoes, I put in a bunch of peppers, and had to replace all of them. So not only was it kind of defeating the whole purpose of my vegetable garden, but the fact was it cost me more in the long run. So they always kid about how much that tomato that you grew at home really costs. So that kind of doubled my cost that year. So anyway, so you're going to work that up. And another place to really look at if you're looking for some information and you want to do a smaller garden, especially if you're starting, is there is a website called www.squarefootgardening.org. And there they have a website, and they basically deal with smaller gardens and smaller footprints. And the nice thing about it is you can go on there and you can go through there, and there's actually great little diagrams as to measuring out your garden, by a 12 foot by 12 inch by 12 inch square, and how many vegetables you can actually put in there. So you can choose what you want, and there's a whole list of them out there. So that's a really good website to go to, and that again is www.squarefootgardening.org. So that's a really great resource to check out. And also do a Google search, as far as small footprint gardens, or go to the University of Minnesota Extension website and type in garden plants. And there's also a lot of information that you can read there. So it's kind of hard for me to show you what I'm doing here, just because I'm not digging up my yard. I actually have raised vegetable beds that my husband built last year, and last year was the first year that we had them and really liked them for a lot of different reasons. So Now, which leads me to maybe the next type of garden that you want to plant, and that's buying a raised vegetable bed kit. Now, you can actually buy them. I've seen them at some of the local greenhouses. I've seen them at Ace Hardware. Of course, the big box retailers are going to have regular kits that you can just assemble and put together. And that's something that I did, was I bought mine. The basis of it was, the square part of it was actually just some stuff that we had to put together. And mine were a little different because they were kind of a galvanized sheet metal, and that we put in, and it made a 4x8 rectangle. Because I wanted them up a little bit higher rather than on the ground, my husband built some support stands to put them on. So what's really nice is, for me, as I get a little older and I can actually reach into them a little bit better, I'm not stooping over. So it's just a matter of what you want. And again, the internet is a great place to research it. There's some really good books at the library once it opens. You know, check them out. You can even find some books online if you're, have an e-reader. So that's really helpful too. But anyway, if you buy those pre-manufactured squares and you don't want to put them up on the platform beds that my husband did, you can just put them on the ground, and then you can fill them up with regular garden soil, so you don't have to do any digging there. So there's that advantage to it. But when you put those garden beds down, you have to be really careful that, yes, you want to scrape that top layer of soil off, but some people have actually just left it there, and what they've done is they've layered cardboard and newspaper on top of it, and that will smother it out. Also, that paper and that cardboard will decompose over time, and it will add nutrients back into the ground. It will just decompose, so it's kind of acting like an underground compost bin. Another way, if you don't want to go to that extreme of buying and having a lot of expense with the raised garden beds that you purchase, there's container gardening too. Now, every year I always show you how to container garden, because that's really one thing that I love to do, because it's something that I can change out in my landscape every year. My front porch always looks a little different. There's probably a couple of containers that stay the same every year because they are my favorites. But every year I create some new type of floral container and put them around my yard for extra color, within flower beds or on our cement patio area or on my front porch steps. Now, the nice thing about container gardening is you don't have to spend a lot of money for these containers. It can be something as simple as finding a little garden bowl like this, or all you need is like a 5-gallon bucket, just like this. Now, I bought this, it's brand new, so you have to be really careful when you're selecting a 5-gallon bucket such as this, because if you can find them from a bakery, that's really great, because they're considered food grade. If you buy like a 5-gallon bucket of paint, you don't want to use that, because those chemicals from the paint will leach into it, and you don't want that for your vegetables and your soil. It's not great. So if you can find these run about $5-6, so they're pretty inexpensive. The only thing that you really have to do is on the bottom, you're going to want to drill some holes in the bottom so that you get really good drainage, because that's always key for any garden and any container, is you want to make sure that you have drainage. So just buckets like this work really good. I did, in case in point, there was a book that I read by Craig Alahulier, I believe, and he is into growing tomatoes, and he lives in a very heavily shaded area, and the only place that he really gets any sun is on his driveway. And so he likes to experiment and collect seeds from heirloom tomatoes, and so he basically grows about 100 tomato plants every year to collect seeds and find old heirloom varieties, and he all does it in 5-gallon containers such as that. So that is, another inexpensive resource for you to do. And it's something, if you have a couple of vegetables that each kid wants to plant, you can give them a container or a bucket, and they can plant what they want, and then they're responsible for their watering and their care all season long for it. And with getting kids involved in it, you never know, you might get them to eat some vegetables. So and there's a lot of fun things that you can have kids do. With vegetables, there's some really fun things on the market. It's great now that garden centers are open because we can actually go and we can look and we can buy. Prior to garden centers being open this year, I wasn't sure what was going to happen, so I started doing some research online and to try and find some plants or some seeds that I could start here at home. I do not know enough about it that I feel comfortable about doing it. So I was kind of looking at other resources until I knew that we would actually have, garden centers open. I guess I like to support local garden centers rather than going, to big box retailers, just for the fact that I know that the quality is better. And I like to support my local garden centers as well. Not that there's anything wrong with big box, but that's just my personal choice. But the fun thing I found is there's some really cool vegetables on the market too, because things that you don't normally see in a regular garden center. And so I picked up some seeds, and these are some fun things that you can use with your kids too, just to kind of get them excited about going into the garden. And so I found these really cute. It's by Botanical Interests. They're called little Thumbelina Carrots. And something like this would work really well because it's short in growth. They can plant it in a small container, and they can watch it grow. They can eat their carrots, tell them it's good for their eyesight, like we've always been told as kids. Radishes is another good thing to plant. Beets. I found these. This is a gourmet blend of beet. As you can see, there's really cool circles in there. So you can cook them. My grandmother made the most phenomenal pickled beets that you can ever imagine. And believe it or not, one year my mom just usually grew regular, purple beets. These are Tiogas with the red stripe, but she always just grew a regular beet. And one year she cooked them up, mashed them up, and she worked it into a chocolate cake. And we never knew we were eating our vegetables in our chocolate cake. Another fun thing to do is to take some lettuce. And I've actually seen this done at some greenhouses where they fill this up with dirt, and this is their salad bowl, and they just sprinkle this on top, and as it comes up and grows big enough to eat, you just continue to cut off of it, and will continue to grow until it kind of doesn't become viable anymore. And now is a great time to plant this outside, just for the fact that it's cool. And if you wait into the summertime, sometimes they bolt too much and they get kind of bitter, and they're not really all that great. So this is another really cool thing. So, and just look around, like in tomatoes and tomato plants in the greenhouse, they have what's called patio tomatoes. I've seen them, and so they're a little bit shorter in stature, but grow really nice in a container like this. Find a cherry tomato plant. Kids think those are really cool. My biggest mistake as my first time gardener with my own garden at home, I loved cherry tomatoes as a kid. I thought they were really cool, and so I thought, I'm gonna plant 6 cherry tomato plants. I had cherry tomatoes everywhere. And my oldest son, he'd be out in the garden, playing outside, and he would plop himself down in the middle of those cherry tomato plants, and he would just eat them like candy. And to this day, he still loves tomatoes. Cucumbers, you can do those in containers, and there's a bush style cucumber that you can get that doesn't grow really long and lengthy, and it's contained a little bit more. I have a galvanized old fire ring that I have put in my garden, and I put the bush style cucumber on it, and actually I can kind of start to train some of the longer tendrils up an old wooden ladder, just as kind of something decorative for my garden. Herbs are great in containers, just to be able to flavor your dishes and just add different flavors, and something a little bit healthier than always adding the salt and pepper, and giving it a different taste. Carrots and radishes I talked about. Peppers are great in a container because they don't get really tall. They will get heavy, so you'll probably have to, with fruit, so you'll probably have to stake them up, but what a deal. Those are great. I've seen eggplants, and you can do kale, you can do Swiss chard. There's a rainbow Swiss chard that's really awesome. It's really pretty. Strawberries, you can actually find already started strawberry plants and plant a few of them in a container. I've actually seen 2 in a hanging basket where it's called a tumbling Tom tomato. that you can plant in a hanging basket, and you can hang it from a shepherd's hook. So those are just a few things, you know, to consider if you want to start gardening, or say maybe you do start this way smaller in a small container garden, that you know, can work yourself up into the bigger gardens. Again, it's a great family activity. I know that there's been a lot of questions coming up about, is my food in my garden that I grow going to be safe? And yes, it will be, because you're growing it in your own yard. You're the only one handling it. And just like anything, you're pulling anything out of the yard, out of your garden, you're going to wash, just like you're constantly washing your hands nowadays. Every time I turn around, right now I work at a local greenhouse, and once every hour I'm going and washing my hands and making sure I'm not touching my face. But you're going to do that at home with your vegetables anyway, so you are maintaining, and you and your family are the only one touching those vegetables. You don't have anybody else that's coming in to touch those vegetables. So and there's a lot of research starting to come out about that, but since I'm not an epidemiologist or a scientist, I'm just going by what little I read, and just that, you know, it's going to be safe coming out of your yard. And so that's, you know, and if you have somebody that, you know, comes and wants something out of your garden, you know, pick it for them, give it in a bag, tell them to wash it, because you never know where they've been. So just a word of caution, just as far as how you're handling your food, not just now, but, you know, always in the future. You know, this is just always, you know, coming out of your garden, because you're out there, there's animals out there, you know, that are roaming around, there's, you know, insects and that, and so you just want to always make sure that you're washing your stuff coming right out of the garden. So and also keep sanitizing all the tools that you use out there too, just to kind of give that extra precaution. So so there's just a little bit of something that you can be working on right now, creating your own victory garden. I hope this finds you well. I'm anxious for the weather to warm up a little bit to kind of get some of the rest of my vegetables. I've done some seed starting. I found some fun stuff that I'm looking forward to trying. I found some new zinnias for my flower garden. I love zinnias, they're one of my favorites. And I found some really cool seeds for tomatoes. So I'm going to do a Rapunzel cherry tomato. It's supposedly the tomatoes that fall down kind of like Rapunzel's hair and coming out of the tower. And then I found what's called a micro tom, which is a very small cherry tomato plant. So we're going to see, the seeds are just starting to pop up now, so we'll see how that goes, because I haven't done it in a long time. I used to do a lot of sunflowers and nasturtiums and stuff. And then earlier this year, I did my winter sowing episode, and I'm kind of watching those things. And so there's some things starting to pop up in some of those jugs in my little greenhouses sitting out there. So hopefully when they start to pop up a little bit more and I don't have to social distance from my camera guy, I'll bring you back in and show you what I've got there, and see how successful I was. Like I said, there's some things popping up, so I'm really excited to see what's happening there. So, and we'll continue to talk about that perhaps in the future. And so just want to say, hey, I'm doing fine here. I hope you all are too. Get outside, enjoy the sunshine. It's absolutely glorious to be out there. And I'm having a little problem. As you can see, I've been kind of playing with my hair, and so I'm gonna sign off now, because I think I'm gonna, just as a good gardener, going out in my tools. I hope my hairstylist doesn't get too upset with me, because I think I need to go trim my bangs. So what else does a gardener use? So anyway, again, I wish you well, and just here's some food for thought. Just remember, to plant a garden is to believe in tomorrow. So I'm signing off, wishing you well, and happy digging.